Democrats are brainwashed. I don't understand how you guys can support the killing of 40,000 people over the past 3 weeks, but yet when Trump bombs Iran, this is what they were asking for. They were asking to be bombed so that the government can go away. Now you guys are upset that like an elementary school of children was killed. Well, what about all the 40,000 people that were killed before? This doesn't make any sense. You guys are fake humanitarians and you guys are brainwashed. It's delusional. You guys don't make sense.
What's up, family? I appreciate you guys for rocking with me. I'm not even going to sugarcoat this. What we're talking about today is tough to hear, but it's real. And the problem is, here in America, we've gotten so comfortable that a lot of people don't even recognize what real threats look like anymore. We live good over here. We live free. We live protected. Most people wake up every day and don't even think twice about their rights, about their safety, and about the fact that they can speak freely without worrying about their government coming after them. That's not normal across the world. That's rare across the world, actually. And that's something that had to be fought for, something people died for. And yet, somehow, despite all of that, you got people in this country, politicians, media figures, activists, who are out here defending regimes that stand against everything we believed in. And I'm talking about Iran, a regime that has spent decades spreading terror, funding extremist groups, destabilizing entire regions, and openly chanting death to America. And instead of calling that out for what it is, you got Democrats in this country capping or caping for them, making excuses, downplaying the threat, acting like the real problem is how America responds. That is completely backwards. It makes no sense. You got people defending the IRGC. You got people running cover for radical ideologies that would never tolerate the freedoms we have here in the United States. And it tells you something deeper is going on, because this isn't just disagreement. This is a mindset that is so committed to opposing American strength that it will side with America's adversaries just to score political points. And let's be clear about something. When you are dealing with regimes like Iran, you're not dealing with rational actors in the way people like to pretend. These are not folks sitting around trying to negotiate in good faith. These are people who understand one thing: strength. That's it. They respond to strength and they exploit weakness. We've tried the other route. We tried diplomacy. We tried sending money. We tried playing nice. And what has it gotten us? More aggression, more instability, more emboldened behavior, to the point where they try to make nuclear bombs to overthrow and destroy the United States of America. So when a president steps up and says, if we have to, we will go there, people lose their minds. But that's what deterrence looks like. You don't maintain peace by advertising weakness. You maintain peace by making it very clear that if someone pushes too far, there will be consequences, real consequences. History proves that. Whether people want to admit it or not, there have been moments where America had to show the world exactly what it was dealing with, what it was willing to do, I should say. And that strength prevented even bigger conflicts down the line. That's not warmongering. That's reality. No warmongering. And the crazier part is, even what's happening overseas is the reaction here at home. The fact that people hear strong leadership and think that's the threat instead of the regime that's been chanting death to America for decades tells you everything you need to know. At some point, you got to ask, where do your loyalties lie? Because more and more it feels like for a certain segment of the political class, it's not about America first. It's about power, ideology, and pushing a vision of this country that looks nothing like what the founders intended. Hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and I want you guys to check this out.
So President Donald Trump says that Iranians want them to keep bombing. They want the whole Islamic regime completely wiped out.
You said Iranians would be mad if you stopped these attacks, but why would they want you to blow up their infrastructure, to cut off their power? Wouldn't that be punishing Iranians for the actions of the regime?
They would be willing to, and it's suffering, they would be willing to suffer that in order to have freedom. The Iranians have, and we've had
It's true.
numerous intercepts. Please keep bombing. Bombs that are dropping near their homes. Please keep bombing. Do it. And these are people that are living where the bombs are exploding. And when we leave and we're not hitting those areas, they're saying, please come back, come back, come back. All I can tell you is they want freedom.
Yep.
They have lived in a world that you know nothing about. It's a violent, horrible world where if you protest, you are shot. They want us to keep bombing, even if it jeopardizes, because their life is in much greater danger. They want freedom for Iran, but it's very hard for them to protest. I actually tell them, I said, don't go out. I fully understand. Nobody in this room would go out. I don't think there's any, because frankly, it's not a question of bravery. We're all brave, right? You're brave, I'm brave, we're all brave. But we're also intelligent. If you have people shooting at you, expert shots with the best rifles you can get, and hitting you right between the eyes every single time, and you're looking here and you're seeing and you're looking here, you're out of there. I don't care who it is.
Now, at first you hear that and you're like, wait, that sounds crazy. But there are actual Iranians agreeing with it. You see a whole chain of Iranians on Twitter. I am Iranian. I also have lots of family spread out inside Iran that say nothing, I repeat, nothing is scarier than the regime surviving. I am also Iranian and I have a lot of family living in Iran. They also say nothing, I repeat, nothing is scarier than Iranians for Iranians than the regime surviving. Not bombs, not the destruction of any infrastructure. I'm Iranian, my family in Iran, and I fully support this war and endorse President Trump's resolve to obliterate the murderous Islamic regime. Guys, these people are terrified of the Islamic regime surviving to the point where they're willing to sacrifice even their own life if they have to for it to be completely destroyed.
Now, this is where it really starts to hit home because we're not just talking about foreign policy in theory. We're talking about people sitting in our government right now. People who are supposed to represent you. And instead, what do we see? We see individuals like Rashid Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, AOC, a whole group of them consistently coming out with rhetoric that downplays serious threats while criticizing America for showing strength. And at some point, you have to call that out. Because when you are more outraged at your own country taking a firm stance than you are at a regime that funds terrorism and destabilizes regions, your priorities are off. That's not just disagreement, that's a serious disconnect. And it's not happening in a vacuum. Iran has spent decades building influence across the Middle East, funding proxy groups and positioning itself strategically, especially around the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical oil choke points in the world. Roughly 20% of the global oil supply passes through there. That's leverage, that's power, and they know it. So this isn't just about them. It affects the global economy. It affects stability worldwide. And yet we have years of leadership that just kept kicking the can down the road, hoping it wouldn't blow up on their watch. Meanwhile, the threat grows. So when a president finally says we're done playing this game, people act like that's the problem. No, that's a shift towards deterrence. And let's be real. A threat is not the same as action. A threat is meant to prevent action. That's the whole point. If you make it clear that the consequences are severe, the other side is less likely to test you. That's basic strategy. Now, if a line were actually crossed, if extreme actions were taken without justification, then yes, you'll have a serious constitutional conversation. That's how this system works. Obviously, they will have to go to Congress if it comes to boots on the ground. And it will have to be approved through Congress because they control the purse strings when it comes to funding war. But that's not what we're dealing with. We're talking about words, right? A warning. And the reaction to that warning has been completely over the top. It's like people are more concerned with tone than they are with the actual threat. And that's what frustrates people because at the end of the day, Americans expect strength. They expect leadership that prioritizes safety, not leadership that hesitates every time it might offend somebody like Ro Khanna here.
If the United States Congress has any life left in it, every member of Congress and senator must be calling for Trump's removal today based on the 25th Amendment. He is threatening the entire destruction of a civilization. He is calling Iranians animals. He is showing a total disregard for the humanity of people in Iran, in Gaza, in Cuba. This is a moral crime. It is a war crime. We need to be demanding that Congress convene today, and we need to be invoking the 25th Amendment.
Why can't you just acknowledge that what Donald Trump said this morning was abhorrent and that no president should ever threaten annihilating a civilization? Why can't you just acknowledge that?
Look, he's talking to them in the way he thinks he needs to talk to them.
Why can't you acknowledge that?
Because
that is something that no president of the United States should say.
Because I don't take orders from you, number one, and number two, I gave him the space to negotiate with the Iranians the best way he knows how.
All right, well, let me just ask a final question, Scott, for the record. Do you think it's acceptable for the president to threaten to annihilate a civilization?
I think it's acceptable for the commander-in-chief to deal with these people in the best way that he can.
Is that a yes or is it a no?
Result.
Is that a yes or is it a no?
So that's a yes.
Is that a yes or a no?
I'm not going to second guess him. I'm not going to second guess him.
So it's a yes.
He put out a statement. We now have a ceasefire.
Okay.
Those are the two things
I just wanted to ask for the record.
Yes.
That's a yes on your part.
Yeah.
We'll leave it there.
And this brings us to the bigger conversation about leadership, because this isn't really about identity, it's about capability. The role of commander-in-chief is not a symbolic position. This is one of the most serious jobs in the world. You are responsible for national security. You are making decisions that can impact millions of lives, and that requires a certain mindset. It requires decisiveness. It requires strength. It requires the ability to say things that may not be popular but need to be said. And what we've seen more and more is a shift towards leadership that prioritizes optics over substance, tone over strength. When you got commentators clutching their pearls over a strong warning while ignoring decades of death to America rhetoric from Iran, that tells you everything. This isn't new. Iran has been consistent in its hostility. What's new is the outrage when America responds with strength, and that's backwards. Strength is not about being reckless. It's about credibility. It's about making sure that when you speak, your adversaries take you seriously, because if they don't, that's when things escalate. That's when conflicts become more likely. And when leadership comes across as unsure or overly reactive to criticism, it creates uncertainty globally. Allies question you and adversaries test you. That's the danger. So when people act like strong rhetoric is the problem while ignoring actual threats, it shows a serious imbalance. And the goal is not to sound nice. The goal is to keep the country safe, right? So now I want you guys to see this next clip in regards to the matter.
I've seen a lot of inaccurate coverage today from the media about these negotiations and these plans already. So let me be clear and correct the record. The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump and his negotiating team. Many outlets in this room have falsely reported on that plan as being acceptable to the United States, and that is false.
And this is what it ultimately comes down to. We got legacy media, mainstream liberal media, a chunk of Congress, and even some Americans who seem more interested in seeing the president fail than seeing the country succeed. And that's a dangerous place to be, because when partisanship becomes more important than national security, everybody loses. We got propaganda, we got narratives being pushed to confuse people, and it's creating division at the same time when unity on core issues should be a given. Because while we are arguing, our adversaries are watching. They're paying attention to how divided we are. And don't think for a second someone like China, our adversary for the United States of America, is not looking at how divided we are. Because if you can have a split party or a division within your own country, that shows not strength within internally, but internal infighting, which obviously the enemy can use that against you depending on who they can sway in regards to what benefits them to overthrow their opposition. It's just common sense. But that matters. Is my whole point of how divided we are when we should be united. But then you see these moments that remind you of what America is supposed to be like. That rescue operation described by the Secretary of Defense and General Dan Kaine, built on a principle of never leaving anyone behind. And that's who we are at our best. That's strength, that's commitment, and that's what should be guiding our decisions, not political games, not outrage cycles, because at the end of the day, this is about the direction of the country. Are we going to stand firm? Or are we going to hesitate? That's the real question. So now I want you guys to check that out.
That brilliant rescue was described by the Secretary of Defense and by General Dan Kaine, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as a long-standing American military rule of never leaving anyone behind.
We leave no man behind.
That is, of course, the old school version of the idea back when only men flew American military planes. General Dan Kaine, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, put it this way.
We leave no one behind.
The general knows, unlike Pete Hegseth, that could have been a woman they were trying to rescue, and it might be a woman the next time.
Well, the very thing is, if you want to make it that technical, if you got him talking about, well, that could have been a woman they were trying to rescue. And it's like, what are we doing now? Seriously? Because the phrase leave no man behind has always been a universal concept. Nobody in the military hears that and thinks it excludes anyone. It's about commitment. It's about not leaving your people behind, period. But instead of focusing on the bravery of the mission, people want to turn it into a gender debate. And that tells you everything. It's not about the mission. It's about finding something to complain about. And that's a sad way to live. It's actually miserable. Just as miserable as he looked, as you've seen in this clip. He's miserable. So when everything becomes an issue, when everything becomes something to be offended by, you lose sight of what actually matters. So you don't have no understanding because you're not really seeking understanding. So that's just ignorance on top of being arrogant with your ignorance, if that makes sense.
Across from the table from in Islamabad, it's just said that he thinks negotiations would be unreasonable while that war is ongoing. So would you ask Israel to hold off strikes to allow some space for these talks?
Well, first of all, I know there's been some conversations between the Israelis and the leadership of our country today. I haven't been involved in that because I've been busy doing stuff in Hungary. I'm actually update when I get on the plane. But let me say a couple things. First of all, I actually think, and there's a lot of bad faith negotiation and a lot of bad faith, propaganda going on. I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states. That said, the Israelis, as I understand it, again, I'm supposed to get a fuller report when I get on the plane, have actually offered to be, frankly, to check themselves a little bit in Lebanon because they want to make sure that our negotiation is successful. That's not because that is part of the ceasefire. I think that's the Israelis trying to set us up for success, and we'll, of course, see how that unfolds in the next few days. But look, if Iran wants to let this negotiation fall apart in a conflict where they were getting hammered over Lebanon, which has...
And that brings it full circle. For a lot of these people, it's simple. Orange man bad. That's it. That's the framework. And when that mindset creeps into national security, it becomes dangerous with this whole Trump derangement syndrome. Because now you got people willing to undermine operations, willing to leak information, willing to root against outcomes just to score political points. Think about that. Pilot, right? Alone, vulnerable, relying on everything to go right. And you got people hoping for the worst in America for their own American servicemen. That's not politics. That's a problem. And when you got people in Congress saying everything needs to be run through them in real time, it makes you wonder, do you actually want oversight or do you want control over the narrative? Because in situations like that, timing and secrecy matter. You don't broadcast strategy to the world. That's how you lose. And our adversaries are watching all of it. They're watching the division, the leaks, the outrage, and they will exploit it if we let them. And with that being said, I want to hear from you guys. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Where do you stand with all of this? Because we're not out of the woods yet. There's still a lot going on. You got ongoing tensions. You got negotiations that different countries feel differently about. Israel has its stance. Iran has its stance. Even Lebanon being involved raises questions. There's a lot happening. And none of this is settled. So we got to stay informed, we got to stay aware, and we got to keep having these conversations. And if you made it this far, I appreciate you. Hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your post notifications so you don't miss the next one. Peace.